Thanksgiving week in rural Welch, Oklahoma. A quiet town where people leave their doors unlocked, where everyone knows everyone, and where nothing bad is supposed to happen. 16-year-old Ashley Freeman was celebrating her birthday. Her best friend, Lauria Bible, had come over for cake, laughter, and a sleepover. Two girls, inseparable, full of life and teenage plans, music, crushes, dreams. It should have been a night they remembered forever. It was, but not for the reason anyone expected.
I had dreams of it being her wedding day, and I was standing at the front of the church, watching her walk down the aisle. And when her dad lifted her veil, she had no face.
It started with a house fire, and then it was a murder, and then it was 2 girls abducted.
You look over and you see there's something up there on that floor. You could instantly tell it was a body of a man.
As far as anybody's saying, there are no suspects, but the family feel that there is one really important suspect, and that is the entire Craig County Sheriff's Department.
While rumors about the 2 teenagers kept piling up, a conspiracy involving the police, local drug rings, and the Mexican cartel emerged. Left on their own, the Bible family took it upon themselves to find the girls and bring down the men responsible for their disappearance.
He said, "Was you not scared to talk to me?" And I said, "No. I'm a mom and I want to find my child, and I will do whatever it takes to find her."
In the early hours of December 30th, 1999, neighbors saw it first. A glow in the distance. Ashley's family home was on fire. By the time first responders arrived, the house was nothing but charred timber and smoke rolling across the frozen Oklahoma field. Inside the rubble, they found a body, later identified as Ashley's mother, Kathy Freeman. But Ashley, Lauria, and Ashley's father, Danny, were missing. At first, investigators believed they were victims of the fire, until evidence changed everything. Danny Freeman had been shot before the fire. Someone had killed him, set the home ablaze, and vanished with the girls. This wasn't an accident, it was a kidnapping. Lauria's parents arrived at the scene before police had even finished their search. Lauria's car was still parked outside her purse, and money were still there. She hadn't run away. Neither had Ashley. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation took over. But the case grew cold quickly. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the Freemans were involved in drugs. Others whispered that Danny had conflicts with local law enforcement. There were stories of known criminals in the area who had threatened the family before. And then there were sightings. Reports of the girls alive, held captive, moved from state to state. But nothing was ever proven. Not one of those tips brought them home. Nearly 2 decades passed before the truth cracked open. A convicted criminal, Warren Philip Welch II, was named as a prime suspect, connected to violent activity, drugs, and rumored trafficking operations. Witnesses claimed he had bragged about the girls. He died before he could be questioned. Another man, Ronnie Busick, was eventually charged in 2018 after confessing to involvement. He claimed the girls were held for days, then killed. Their remains were never found. Even with arrests made, the story still has no ending. The biggest question remains unanswered. Where are Ashley Freeman and Lauria Bible? Every year, the Bible and Freeman families set a place at Thanksgiving for the girls who never came home. What should have been a night of celebration became a decades-long nightmare. A cold case filled with stolen futures and unanswered questions. Ashley and Lauria were more than victims. They were daughters. They were best friends. They should have grown up, fallen in love, chased their dreams. Instead, they became a haunting chapter in Oklahoma's darkest history. And until their remains are found, until justice is complete, there is no closure. Just 2 missing girls, frozen in time, and a promise. We will not stop searching Thanksgiving is supposed to be a time of homecoming, of hugs, food, warmth, and memories. For Joel and Lisa Guy, it was their last. In November 2016, the couple welcomed their grown son, 28-year-old Joel Guy Jr., home to Knoxville, Tennessee, for what should have been a normal holiday. They didn't know he wasn't coming home to visit. He was coming home to kill.
The man accused of murdering his parents and then cutting up their bodies in their West Knox County home is due in court Friday. We're learning new details tonight that are gruesome and certainly may be difficult to hear. Lawyers for Joel Guy Jr. The man accused of killing and then his parents.
Law enforcement officials showing a meat grinder and gas can were found in the trunk of what they say is Guy's car.
Guy is a college student in Louisiana. The Knox County Sheriff's Office called the crime scene gruesome.
It would be described as horrific, a very gruesome crime scene.
What investigators found inside has been dubbed by the state as a diabolical stew.
Joel Jr. had always been an odd one. Brilliant, but distant. Quiet, but entitled. At 28 years old, he had never worked a day in his life, living off his parents while calling it a student lifestyle. But Joel Sr. and Lisa were preparing to retire. They planned to move to a smaller home and stop supporting him financially. For most people, that would mean finally growing up. For Joel Jr., it meant murder. According to the notes later found in his room, Joel spent weeks calculating every detail. He prepared a shopping list: chemicals, blades, gloves, and plastic tubs. And a line that still chills detectives to this day: kill them both. Money all mine. On November 26th, the holiday was over. Lisa went grocery shopping for one last dinner with her son. When she came home, Joel Jr. attacked her with a knife, stabbing her 30 times. When Joel Sr. walked in moments later, he was ambushed. His injuries were so brutal, they severed his ribs. But it didn't end there. Joel Jr. dragged their bodies into the bathroom and began dismembering them. He removed limbs. He dissolved pieces in chemicals. He boiled body parts in plastic tubs in a process investigators would later call a diabolical stew. The killer wrote it all down like a to-do list. But he made one fatal mistake. He left the scene before finishing. Lisa didn't show up to work on Monday, and everyone knew something was wrong. A welfare check turned into one of the most gruesome crime scenes in Tennessee history. Inside the house, the heat had been turned up to accelerate decomposition. Chemical fumes filled the air, and scattered across the rooms were body parts, tools, and Joel Jr.'s handwritten notebook, detailing everything the police chief described it as the most horrific murder scene I've ever witnessed. Joel Jr. was arrested days later at his apartment, calm, expressionless, carrying bandages and a fresh set of cuts on his hands. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming, and the motive chillingly simple: money. Joel Jr. expected to inherit over $500,000 in insurance and assets. Instead, he got 2 life sentences. Today, the Guy home has been demolished. Nothing stands there now, just quiet ground over unthinkable memories. But the story lingers, a warning wrapped in tragedy. Sometimes the monsters aren't strangers. Sometimes they come home for Thanksgiving and never leave. Because evil doesn't always arrive with a mask or a weapon. Sometimes it sits at the table. Sometimes it calls you mom and dad. Thanksgiving weekend in Snellville, Georgia should have been like any other holiday. Quiet, routine, and filled with family. For 25-year-old Heather Strube, it was a simple custody exchange with her estranged husband, Stephen Strube. They met at a Target parking lot, a neutral and public place where she believed she was safe. But while holiday shoppers went about their day, someone else was waiting with a far darker plan.
Her mom has not stopped looking for her. And there's been a bunch of weirdness in the cops in with the way the police handled it. With the police, that's her. That's Heather Teague. That's the girl that was abducted. And so her mom is still, like, there's still a hotline that you can call, or her mom puts her number out there and says you can call me directly.
Heather arrived in the late afternoon, her young son buckled in the back seat. Everything seemed normal. She handed her son to Stephen, and the exchange appeared to end peacefully. Then, out of nowhere, a person dressed in a black wig, sunglasses, and a fake mustache walked toward her. Witnesses recalled how strangely calm the figure appeared. There was no fight, no shouting. Just a single gunshot fired at point-blank range. Heather collapsed instantly. The disguised shooter turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if nothing had happened. The attack was immediate, personal, and unmistakably intentional. Investigators quickly realized this was not a random crime. The shooter had been prepared and knew exactly where to find Heather. At first, suspicion fell on Stephen Strube, but despite the bitter custody battle and divorce, he had an alibi. The case turned when law enforcement uncovered surveillance footage and physical evidence pointing to someone even closer to the situation. Stephen's mother, Joan Shirley had disguised herself as a man, stalked the parking lot, and executed Heather because she believed Heather was going to take her grandson away permanently. It was a murder fueled by obsession, entitlement, and cold calculation, with a grandmother orchestrating every detail. When police searched her car, they found the wig, the mustache, and the murder weapon. The case was solved, but it didn't feel like justice, only heartbreak. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. Shirley was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault, and was sentenced to life in prison. But no sentence could undo the damage. Heather's little boy would grow up without the mother who loved him, and forever shadowed by the truth of what happened that day. Today, shoppers still walk through that same Target parking lot, unaware of the violence that unfolded there. But for those who remember, that stretch of asphalt is not just part of suburbia. It is a grave marker for a life stolen in broad daylight. Heather Strube walked into that parking lot believing she was safe. She never saw the danger because it came disguised as family. And every Thanksgiving, her empty place at the table reminds everyone who loved her that evil doesn't always hide in the dark. It sometimes steps into the light wearing a wig and a smile. Thanksgiving is supposed to be a day of warmth, a day where families put aside differences, gather around the table, and give thanks for another year together. In Jupiter, Florida, the Merhige family did just that in 2009. They cooked together, laughed together, shared stories from childhood, a picture-perfect holiday in a beautiful, peaceful neighborhood. And among them was Paul Michael Merhige, a quiet, troubled 35-year-old man who rarely attended family gatherings. But that night he showed up unexpectedly, calm, polite, almost too peaceful. What no one knew was that Paul had been dreaming of this night for years. Not to celebrate, but to kill.
Jupiter family's future was shattered.
A man shot and killed 4 family members after Thanksgiving dinner, including 6-year-old Michaela Sitton, who was sleeping in her bed.
Pretend like, she's just gone for an extended vacation. You can almost trick yourself. But it's almost been a year. God has blessed us with a beautiful little girl, and he just took her home.
An unspeakable crime that shocked a community and devastated a family.
People say, how could you be in that house? And the answer is, how could you not? The good memories were for years and years and years. That night only lasted, a few minutes.
Dinner ended. The family sang karaoke. Children played in the next room. No one noticed Paul slipping quietly into the master bedroom where his sleeping sister rested. At around 10 p.m., everything shattered. Paul walked back into the room holding a handgun and opened fire. His first target, his twin sisters, Carla and Lisa. Then he shot his aunt, who tried to crawl away. His next target was the most devastating. His 6-year-old cousin, Michaela, a little girl everyone called Sweet Michaela. Paul shot her once as she slept. Her parents screamed, begging him to stop. He looked them in the eyes and said, "I've been waiting 20 years to do this." Chaos erupted. Family members hid behind furniture. Someone called 911. But Paul walked calmly out the front door, got into his car, and drove off into the night as if he had simply finished a chore. A 40-day manhunt followed. Paul was finally arrested in a small motel in the Florida Keys. Living under a fake name, watching news coverage of his own crime.
Think about how she would have been 16 right now, going on 17.
Murders. All joy and laughter and little girl giggles left us just a cold, empty house.
I felt that the Lord had placed in our hearts that we needed to keep moving and that it wasn't over for us, that chapter wasn't over.
The Merhige massacre is remembered as the darkest Thanksgiving crime in American history. A night that began with turkey, laughter, and family love ended in unimaginable tragedy. To this day, the surviving family members struggle with what happened, with the knowledge that a loved one planned it all with chilling patience. Thanksgiving may be a day of gratitude, but for the Merhige family, it will forever be the night their world fell apart. Thanksgiving in Little Falls, Minnesota is usually calm, small-town quiet, the kind where neighbors know one another and nothing truly terrible ever seems to happen. On Thanksgiving Day 2012, most families were setting the table, preparing turkey, and getting ready for a warm evening together. But inside the secluded home of 64-year-old Byron David Smith, the mood was very different. Smith, a retired security engineer, had become increasingly paranoid after repeated break-ins at his property. He lived alone, convinced that someone was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As the holiday afternoon settled in, Smith claimed he heard something. A thump at the window, a rustle outside, footsteps. Then, the unmistakable sound of someone entering his basement. That someone was 17-year-old Nicholas Brady, and shortly behind him was his cousin, 18-year-old Haley Kiefer. Both teens had been involved in previous break-ins in the area, and Smith believed they had targeted his house before. But what happened next would spark nationwide debate and turn Thanksgiving into a day stained with horror. Smith waited quietly in the basement, armed with a rifle and a tape recorder capturing every moment. When Brady stepped onto the landing, Smith fired once, then again. The teen collapsed instantly. Minutes later, Kiefer entered the house calling out for her cousin. As she made her way down the steps, Smith shot her as well. Panicking and injured, she fell. Smith fired again and again. The audio would later reveal moments of cold calculation, pauses, footsteps, whispers. The final shots were delivered at point-blank range, long after the teens were incapacitated. Hours passed in silence. While families across Minnesota sat down for Thanksgiving dinner, Smith sat alone in his house with the bodies of the two teenagers. He didn't call police. He didn't notify neighbors. Instead, he waited until the next day, calmly walking into the sheriff's office to report what he described as a home invasion and self-defense. But investigators quickly realized this was far more than a split-second act of fear. It was an execution. When detectives arrived at the house, they found the tape recorder Smith had set up before the shootings.
Court releases audio of Byron Smith murders. A chilling recording of the murder of teenage cousins Nick Brady and Haley Kiffer by Minnesota homeowner Byron Smith has been made public.
On the audio, he could be heard muttering to himself, expressing anger, frustration, and at times chilling satisfaction. Prosecutors argued that Smith hadn't simply defended his home, he had lured the teens deeper into the basement to ensure they could not escape, then used excessive and unnecessary force. In 2014, the court convicted him of premeditated murder, sentencing him to life in prison without parole. The community of Little Falls was split. Some saw Smith as a man pushed too far by repeat burglaries. Others saw a killer who went far beyond self-defense, choosing vengeance over restraint. What no one could deny was that a holiday meant for family and gratitude had been transformed into a scene of heartbreaking violence. Today, the Thanksgiving Day murders remain one of the most controversial self-defense cases in American history, a reminder that fear can twist into something far more dangerous, and that a single moment can turn a peaceful holiday into a nightmare. For the families of Haley Kiffer and Nicholas Brady, Thanksgiving will never again be a day of celebration. It will forever be the day two teenagers walked into a house looking for trouble and never walked out.